The foreclosure notice arrived in a plain white envelope sitting beside my kid's cereal bowl, and I stayed quiet while my stomach folded in on itself, because the cruel part wasn't the letter. It was the name in my phone that I was about to call, and how sure I'd always been that blood meant you won't let me drown. My name is Ophelia, I'm 39, and I work in content and marketing. Or I did, before my brain decided to pull the emergency brake on my life. For most of my childhood, my brother Rhodes was my safest place. He was the older one, the fixer, the guy who could talk our mom down when she spiraled, and crack a joke that made me laugh mid-cry. After Dad died, slowly, painfully, the kind of cancer that steals a person in pieces, Rhodes and I got welded together by grief. We both had panic disorder. We both knew what it felt like to wake up with our hearts sprinting like something invisible was chasing us through the room. For years, we had a rhythm. He'd call me when he couldn't breathe. I'd call him when I couldn't stop shaking. We'd do the same grounding exercises we learned in therapy. Count 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear. We'd survive the hour. Then we'd joke about it later like we'd beaten a monster in a video game. And then Rhodes became rich. Not nice house in a good neighborhood rich. I mean the kind of money where your calendar has travel days, the way normal people have laundry days. He'd say it was luck, hard work, timing, a few smart risks. Whatever it was, it exploded. New cars, a second house for weekends, nannies, a backyard renovation that looked like a resort brochure. And every time I'd congratulate him, he'd say the same line. If you ever need anything, you know I've got you. I always said no. I meant it. I was proud. I had my own family, a husband who tried his best, a kid who made my heart feel like it had its own heartbeat. I didn't want to be a charity case. Then last spring, my panic disorder stopped being a condition and started being a prison. It wasn't just anxiety. It was the full body, lights blaring, can't swallow, can't sit still, can't drive kind. I had one episode in a meeting and I watched my coworkers' faces shift from concern to discomfort to something colder, like they were already backing away from the unstable woman label. I tried to push through. I tried medication adjustments, therapy twice a week, breathing apps, ice packs on my wrists, walking circles in the parking lot while pretending I was on a phone call. But one morning I sat in my car outside my job, hands on the steering wheel, and I realized I physically could not get out. Not I don't want to, not I'm nervous. My body refused. My throat closed. My vision narrowed. My chest hurt like someone was standing on it. I quit. I told myself it would be temporary. A few weeks, maybe a month. I'd heal. I'd come back stronger. Instead, the months stacked up like dirty plates. My husband picked up extra hours, but it wasn't enough. Autopay didn't care that my nervous system was fried. Autopay just kept pulling rent, car, payment, insurance, utilities, groceries, the random kid expense that shows up like a jump scare, school fees, shoes, medicine, a birthday party gift. Then one afternoon, I opened my banking app and saw the negative number. And my brain did that special thing it does where it takes a problem and turns it into a clip. The house, the car, bankruptcy, losing everything, my kid's room, my kid's bed, my kid watching strangers walk through our living room with clipboards because we couldn't keep up. I called Rhodes a few times over the next couple weeks, not to ask, just to talk, just to be near him in the way you can be near someone through a phone. But it was like he'd developed an allergy to my reality. If I said things are tight, he'd suddenly remember he had to run. If I said I'm scared, he'd respond with a quick, you'll figure it out. You always do. Yet on social media, his life looked like a glossy magazine, a pool being installed, a new outdoor kitchen, a trip overseas with his wife and kids, a caption about making memories, a picture of his backyard at night, string lights, fire pit, perfect landscaping, like money had turned into atmosphere. I'd stare at those posts with a weird numbness, like my brain couldn't process that the person who once held my hand at Dad's funeral now couldn't even hold space for a conversation. And I kept hearing his old words in my head. If you ever need anything, I've got you. One night, after my kid finally fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with the foreclosure notice and a pile of late bills. My husband was in the other room, silent in that exhausted way people get when they're trying not to. Say the thing that might break everything. I didn't want to be the sister who asks. I didn't want to be the woman who becomes a burden. I didn't want to confirm the ugly voice in my head that whispered, you're failing. But I also didn't want my kid to pay for my pride. So I called Rhodes. He picked up on the third ring. His voice sounded normal, calm, like he was walking around his perfect backyard barefoot. Hey, Ophelia, he said. What's up? My throat tightened. I forced the words out anyway. Rhodes, I need to ask you something, and I hate that I'm asking. A pause, not long, but long enough for me to feel the temperature change. Okay, he said carefully. I stared at the foreclosure notice, the paper suddenly blurry. If we lose the house, I said, or the car, if we're about to go bankrupt, would you help us? I'm not asking for a number. I'm asking if you would help. He didn't answer right away. I could hear movement. Maybe he was walking. Maybe he'd put me on speaker. Maybe his wife was in the room and he didn't want to sound generous. Then he exhaled like I was asking him for a kidney. No, he said. One simple word. Clean, sharp, final. I blinked. I actually thought I misheard him. No? I repeated stupidly. No, he said again. I can't. My hand started trembling, but I kept my voice even. I kept it soft. I kept it polite. Like if I stayed calm enough, I could undo what I just heard. Can't, I echoed. Or won't. Another pause. Ophelia, he said. And now his voice had that tone, older brother tone, the one that used to feel protective, but suddenly felt like control. My wife makes things complicated. My finances, my family, it's just difficult. I swallowed hard. But you have the means, I said. You're doing backyard projects that cost more than our entire year of bills. Don't do that, he snapped fast. Don't count my money. I went quiet. Not because I had nothing to say. Because if I said what I was thinking, I would sob. And I refused. refused to be the woman begging for mercy over the phone. So I asked one question carefully, like I was stepping on glass. You used to tell me you'd help if I ever needed it, I said. What changed? And here's the part that still makes my skin crawl. He laughed, just a little, like I was being dramatic. That was years ago, he said. Life changes. Life changes. As if my dad dying wasn't a life change. As if my panic disorder swallowing me whole wasn't a life change. As if my kid's home being on the line wasn't a life change. I felt something in me go cold. Not anger yet. Not even grief. Just clarity, because it wasn't that he didn't have money. It was that he didn't want to spend even a fraction of his comfort to save my family from drowning. And the worst part? He sounded relieved to finally say it out loud. I ended the call without a fight. I told him, okay, in a voice so calm it didn't sound like me. Then I hung up and sat there staring at the wall, trying to understand how someone can be your safe place for decades and then suddenly treat you like an inconvenience. That night, I didn't cry loudly. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just opened my laptop and started writing a list, not a revenge list, not a dramatic one, a proof list, because I realized something. Rhodes didn't just change his mind. He was hiding something, and I could feel it in the way his voice tightened when I mentioned his spending, in the way he blamed his wife but didn't sound convinced, in the way he said, life changes, like he was repeating a line he'd practiced. So I started pulling the threads I was allowed to pull. Family group messages, old texts, emails, anything where he'd ever offered help, anything where he'd ever positioned himself like my third parent, anything where he'd made promises, because when someone flips that hard, there's almost always a reason they don't want you to see. And while I was digging, I found one thing I wasn't expecting. A forwarded email from months earlier, buried in a thread with my mom's name attached, with a subject line that made my blood run cold. Estate planning update. Immediate action required. My fingers hovered over the trackpad because my dad was gone. So why was the word estate suddenly back in our lives? And why did Rhodes never mention it? Hold on, tiny break. When I'm editing these late at night, I get tired, and your comments are what keep me going. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me your city, state, or country. All right, now let me take you back. I clicked the email, and the first sentence was a punch to the chest. It wasn't about my dad. It was about Rhodes. And the action required wasn't paperwork. It was a decision, one that explained exactly why my multimillionaire brother looked me in the eye through a phone call and chose to let me lose everything. The email opened with a clean, professional header, one of those law firm templates that looks polite while it quietly threatens to ruin your life. Estate planning update. Immediate action required. I scrolled, expecting something about my dad's old accounts, maybe a forgotten beneficiary form, but the first sentence hit like a slap. As discussed, we need confirmation that you wish to proceed with restructuring assets prior to the potential creditor action. Creditor action. I read it again, slower. My brother, the man posting vacation photos in backyard waterfalls, had creditors. My hands went cold. My brain started doing that familiar panic math, the kind that turns a single word into a whole disaster movie. I kept scrolling. There were attachments, a draft trust document, a summary of holdings with most of the numbers blurred out in the forwarded version, like someone had deliberately scrubbed it before sending. And a second line, even worse, if the restructuring is delayed, it may be interpreted as an attempt to shield assets, which could expose you to additional litigation risk. Litigation. I felt my mouth go dry. I looked down at the date. It was sent months ago. My mom had forwarded it to a family email thread, and then immediately followed up with, let's discuss this as a family. Please do not bring this up with anyone outside us. I stared at that line so long my eyes started to burn, because as a family meant one thing in our family, decisions made without me, but about me. My husband walked in and saw my face. What? He asked softly, like he was approaching a skittish animal. I turned the laptop toward him. Look. He read in silence, jaw tightening little by little. Creditor action, he said. Litigation risk? I nodded. I couldn't even find my voice yet. He pointed at the trust document attachment. Why is your mom in this? Why was this sent to her? I swallowed. Because Rhodes always loops her in when he wants the family to behave. My husband sat down slowly, like the chair had suddenly gained weight. So he told you no. Because he can't, he said. I wanted to believe that. It would have been easier. It would have made him less cruel. But something about Rhodes's voice on that call, how steady it was, how final, kept poking at me like a splinter. I shook my head. Even if he can't, he could have said that. He could have been honest. Instead, he acted like I was entitled just for asking. My husband didn't argue. He just watched me, eyes tired. Do you want to call your mom? He asked. My stomach flipped. My mom and I had an uneasy peace. The kind you build after trauma when you both pretend the past is handled, because nobody wants to reopen the grave. But that email wasn't a ghost. It was a living thing. So I called her. She answered on the second ring, like she'd been holding the phone. Hi, honey, she said too brightly, too prepared. My throat tightened. Why do I have an email in my inbox about Rhodes restructuring assets before creditor action? Silence. Then she exhaled, slow and controlled. Where did you see that? She asked, as if the real problem was my access to information. In my email, I said. You forwarded it. Another silence. My mom's voice shifted into the tone she used when I was a kid, and she wanted the conversation to end without her being the villain. Ophelia, it's complicated. I almost laughed. It came out as a sharp breath. I don't have room for complicated, I said. We're about to lose our house. I know, she said quickly. I know you've been struggling. I've been worried. Then why was there a family discussion about Rhodes's creditors that nobody told me about? My voice cracked on the last word. I hated that it did. She hesitated. Because Rhodes asked me not to. There it was. I gripped the phone so hard my fingers hurt, so he can keep secrets, but he can't help his sister not lose her home. Ophelia, no! I cut in, and my voice went calm, too calm. The calm that comes right before you stop caring about being liked. Tell me what's happening. My mom exhaled again. There was a situation, a business partner, a separation that wasn't as clean as Rhodes wanted. There are lawyers involved. My heart pounded. Is he being sued? I'm not supposed to say, Mom, a beat. Yes, she whispered, but it's not the way you think. My hands started shaking. Then what way is it? She lowered her voice as if someone might overhear her through the walls. Rhodes, he built everything on leverage, loans, lines of credit. Investors, he doesn't keep liquid cash the way people assume rich people do. I closed my eyes. So all those photos, all those memories, all that perfect backyard, it could have been financed. My husband leaned closer, listening. My mom kept going, words spilling now that the secret door had cracked open. He's been trying to protect what he can. His wife is very anxious about it. She wants everything locked down. She's terrified they'll lose the lifestyle. I swallowed hard. So when I asked for help, he said no because he's scared. That's part of it, she admitted. And Ophelia, I need you to hear me. Your brother is not as free as he looks. My pulse thudded in my ears. What does that mean? She hesitated too long. Mom, I said again, sharper. She sighed like she was stepping off a ledge. His wife monitors everything, she said. Spending, accounts, even messages sometimes. Rhodes has been walking on eggshells. If he gives you money, she'll view it as betrayal. I felt heat rise in my chest, anger sudden and bright. But he told me it wasn't her decision, I said. My mom's silence said everything. I opened my eyes and stared at the foreclosure notice like it was laughing at me. So he lied, I whispered. He simplifies, my mom said, trying to soften it. No, I said, he lied. He looked me in the face, threw the phone, and said no, like I was asking for something disgusting. My mom's voice got small. He's under stress. And I'm not, I snapped. My kids' laughter floated from the other room, innocent and unaware, and it made my throat tighten all over again. I'm under stress with the possibility of losing everything. My mom tried to soothe. Ophelia, I'm not saying he handled it well. I'm saying I took a breath, a slow one. I didn't want to scream. Screaming would turn me into the unstable one again. Screaming would make them dismiss me. So I did the one thing Rhodes never expected from me. I asked for specifics. What is he being sued for? I asked softly. My mom hesitated. A contract dispute. Allegedly. Allegedly, I repeated. Is there a chance he did something wrong? I don't know, she said quickly. Rhodes says he didn't. I let that sit. My brother, the man who always positioned himself like my protector, was now in legal trouble, hiding behind family silence and still living like a king. I realized something then that made my stomach drop. If he was restructuring assets prior to creditor action, it wasn't just fear. It was strategy. And strategy meant he was preparing for a hit. I ended the call politely. I told my mom I needed to process. I didn't argue anymore because arguing would waste the one resource. I couldn't afford to waste energy. When I hung up, my husband stared at me. You okay? He asked. No, I said honestly. But I'm clear. He nodded slowly. What are you thinking? I looked at my laptop, at the proof list I'd already started, the text where Rhodes had offered help, the moments where he had positioned himself as the family hero. I'm thinking, I said, that if Rhodes can move money around to protect himself, then I can move my life around to protect my kid. My husband's eyes softened. Okay, how? I wiped my cheeks with the heel of my hand. No dramatic sobbing. Just a quick clean. A reset. I'm calling the mortgage company, I said. I'm calling a bankruptcy attorney. I'm calling anyone who can buy us time. And I'm going to stop treating Rhodes like the answer. My husband exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. Thank you. That night after my kid was asleep, I got to work. I didn't beg Rhodes again. I didn't send him a paragraph. I didn't threaten. I started making calm calls like a woman who had decided she was done being scared. The mortgage company offered a hardship option if I could provide documentation of job loss and medical leave. It wasn't magic, but it was a lifeline. I asked for every requirement in writing. I asked for timelines. I asked for email confirmations. The bankruptcy attorney explained options without judgment. Some paths were brutal. Some were manageable. None were shame-free, but shame wasn't paying my bills. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to a friend from my old job, someone who had quietly offered support when I disappeared. I told her I was looking for any contract work, even small, even temporary. She replied within minutes. Call me. I have something. I stared at that text for a long time, feeling something strange in my chest. Not relief, hope mixed with rage. Because why did a coworker show up faster than my brother? I got the contract. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't forever. But it was income. It was movement. It was proof to my own nervous system that I was not trapped. Over the next week, I watched my body shift. Not healed, just less cornered. And when I wasn't cornered, I started noticing details I'd ignored before. Rhodes' social media posts stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. No new travel pictures. No backyard updates. No smiling family shots. And then, late one night, my mom accidentally texted me something meant for Rhodes. It was a single line. They filed it. Call me now. My blood went cold. I stared at the screen, waiting for the follow-up apology. Instead, she sent another text seconds later. Ignore. Wrong person. Wrong person. Sure. My hands started trembling again, but not from panic this time, from instinct. Because in a family like mine, when people start whispering and moving and telling you to ignore, it means something big is happening, and they don't want you to be part of it. I didn't respond. I just took a screenshot. Then I did the quietest revenge I've ever done in my life. I opened my proof list again, and I added a new section at the top. Timeline. Not emotions. Not accusations. Dates. Messages. Offers. Silence. Avoidance. The email. The accidental text. And then I emailed the law firm address from the forwarded estate planning update. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't beg. I wrote one calm sentence. I am a family member referenced in the forwarded correspondence. Please confirm whether any restructuring has impacted assets in which I may have a legal interest. I stared at the send button for a long moment, heart thudding, because if Rhodes was restructuring assets, there was a chance, just a chance, that he was moving things in a way that could affect me, not because he owed me money, but because families like ours love to solve problems by quietly shifting burdens onto the person who stayed quiet. quiet. I hit send. The next morning, I woke up to an email response. Short, professional, chilling. We can confirm there is an active matter involving your brother. We cannot disclose details without his authorization. However, if you believe your interests may be affected, we recommend you seek independent counsel immediately. Independent counsel. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at that line, feeling the room tilt. My husband woke up and saw my face. What is it? I handed him my phone. He read the message once, then again. Then he looked up slowly. Ophelia, he said carefully, why would your interests be affected? I swallowed hard because the answer felt ugly even before I said it. Because, I whispered, if Rhodes is about to lose money, he's going to decide what he's willing to sacrifice to keep his life. My phone buzzed again. A new text from Rhodes, just 3 words. We need to talk. I stared at Rhodes's message for a long time, the words glowing like a warning. We need to talk. My first instinct was to respond immediately, to ask why, to demand answers, to beg even now for him to be the brother I remembered, but I didn't. I set my phone down, opened my laptop, and did the least dramatic thing a person can do when their life is on fire. I booked a consultation with an attorney, not because I wanted to punish him, not because I wanted money from him, because the law firm email had said one phrase that wouldn't leave my head. Your interests may be affected. When you've been the good daughter and the good sister your whole life, you learn a painful lesson late. Sometimes your kindness is the easiest tool to use against you. The attorney I spoke to was blunt, the way I needed. Do you have any reason to believe your name is tied to anything? She asked. I almost said no automatically. The reflex of defending Rhodes was still alive in me like a stubborn little organ, but then I remembered my mom's text. They filed it. Call me now. And how fast she'd tried to erase it. And how Rhodes had said, don't count my money, with the kind of sharpness that sounded like fear. So I answered honestly, I don't know, I said, but I'm scared I'm about to find out. She told me to pull my credit report. All 3. She told me to check for any accounts, any inquiries, any loans, any lines of credit I didn't recognize. She told me to put a fraud alert on my file if anything looked off. She told me calmly that families sometimes do creative things when they're panicking. After the call, I sat in my kitchen with my laptop open and my coffee turning cold, my hands trembling for a reason that had nothing to do with panic disorder. I signed in. I verified my identity, and then I saw it. A line of credit, not mine, opened years ago, right around the time Rhodes's lifestyle began to explode into something bigger than his salary could have explained. The account listed a name that made my vision blur. Ophelia. My name, my address, an old one from before I met my husband, a phone number I hadn't used in years, the kind of details that only family would know. And the status? Delinquent. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe for a second. I just stared at the screen, while something deep in my chest cracked open and went perfectly silent. My husband came in, saw my face, and immediately sat beside me. What? He said, voice low. Is that? I turned the laptop to him without speaking. He read. His jaw tightened in slow motion. No, he whispered. No, that can't be. It is, I said. My voice sounded far away like it belonged to someone else. That's why he said no. It wasn't pride. It wasn't boundaries. It wasn't his wife. My husband swallowed hard. He used you. I flinched at the word, even though it was true, because it rewrote my whole past. All those protective big brother moments. All those offers of help. All that, I've got you. It wasn't love. It was insurance. Rhodes called again. This time it was an actual call, not a text. My phone buzzed on the table like a live animal. I didn't answer. I took another screenshot. Then I forwarded everything to my attorney. When she called back, her tone had changed. Sharper. More focused. Do not confront him alone, she said. Do not warn him what you found. We need to document. We need to request records. We need to protect you first. Protect you first. I'd never heard anyone say that to me and my family. For the next couple of days, I moved like a person in a movie. Calm on the outside. Boiling underneath. I filed a dispute. I placed fraud alerts. I froze my credit. I requested account documents. I printed everything. I made a timeline with dates, and I didn't add a single emotion word. No betrayed, no shattered, no how could you, just facts. Because facts don't get dismissed as overreacting. Then Rhodes finally showed up at my front door. Not with his wife, not with his kids, just him. And he looked smaller than I remembered, not physically. Rhodes was still tall, still polished, but something in his eyes was thin and frantic. My kid was at school. My husband was at work. I was alone in the quiet house, standing behind the door with my hand on the lock. He knocked again, softer this time. Ophelia, he called. Please. I opened the door halfway, chain still on. I didn't invite him in. He gave me a quick smile. The old one, the one that used to make me feel safe. It didn't work anymore. I've been calling, he said. Why aren't you answering? I tilted my head. You told me no when I asked if you'd help us stay afloat, so I assumed you didn't want to talk. His smile twitched. Okay, he said carefully, hands up like I was holding a weapon. I deserve that. I do, but listen, things are complicated right now. There it was again, complicated. The family word for we're doing something shady and we need you quiet. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. I need you to sign something. I felt my stomach drop, even though my attorney had warned me. What? I asked softly. Do you need me to sign? It's nothing bad, he said quickly. It's just paperwork, a clarification. My attorney needs it for a situation. It won't affect you. I stared at him. Slowly, I unlatched the chain and opened the door fully. Not because I trusted him, because I wanted him to feel confident. Rhodes stepped inside like he still belonged here, like this was still our old world. He pulled out a folder from under his arm. Crisp pages, tabs, the whole performance of legitimacy. He handed me the top sheet. Just sign at the bottom. I scanned the page. It was written in stiff legal language, but the gist was simple. I would be acknowledging that I had no claim to any shared family assets and that I was not a party to certain financial arrangements. The kind of statement statement someone asks for when they're trying to close the door before a lawsuit kicks it in. My hands stayed steady. My voice stayed calm. Why? I asked. Is my name in any financial arrangements? His eyes flicked up. It isn't. I nodded slowly, like I believed him. Okay. His shoulders loosened with relief. So you'll sign? I set the paper down on my kitchen counter and looked at him. Rhodes, I said gently, do you remember when you told me you'd always have my back? His expression softened just for a second. Of course. And do you remember when I finally asked you if you'd help us not lose our home? And you said no? He winced. Ophelia, I held up a hand, still gentle. Just answer. Why did you say no? His jaw worked. He looked away, like the truth tasted bad. Because, he said quietly, if money leaves my accounts right now, it creates visibility. Visibility. That one word told me everything. I nodded again like I was following. Visibility for who? He hesitated too long. For people. What people? I pressed softly, the same way you coax a confession out of someone who thinks you're still on their side. He exhaled, irritated now. You don't understand. I'm handling it. I leaned forward slightly. And where does that leave me? Rhodes's face hardened. This isn't about you. I stared at him, letting the silence stretch, because he'd just said the quiet part out loud. He shifted, impatient. Are you going to sign or not? I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out a printed sheet of paper. My credit report. I slid it across the counter to him gently, like a gift. Rhodes's eyes dropped to it. His face went pale. What is this? He asked, voice suddenly too tight. It's my credit report, I said calmly. And that delinquent line of credit with my name on it? I'm going to need you to explain it. He didn't answer. He just stared, breathing shallowly, like the floor had moved under him. Ophelia, he said finally, voice low and furious. Where did you get that? I blinked at him. From being an adult, Rhodes, he swallowed. His hands shook slightly, and for the first time in my life, my big brother looked scared of me. I was going to fix it, he said quickly. It was temporary. It was a decision. I cut in, still quiet, still steady. You decided my name was something you could borrow. He shook his head fast. You don't get it. I was building. It was strategic. I never thought it would come back on you. My chest tightened. But it did. He stepped closer, voice urgent. If this gets out, it already did, I said, and I watched him freeze. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I didn't need to. I have an attorney, I continued. And before you start calling me dramatic, Rhodes, I didn't do this to you. You did it to me. His eyes flashed with anger like a cornered animal. You're going to ruin me, he hissed. I tilted my head. No, I'm going to protect myself. There's a difference. He shoved the folder back under his arm like it burned. You're being vindictive. I almost smiled, because that was the old family script. If I stood up for myself, I was cruel. If I stayed quiet, I was mature. I didn't argue. I just slid one more printed page across the counter. A screenshot of my mortgage hardship approval email. The one that confirmed our foreclosure process was paused. Rhodes glanced at it, confused. I fixed my crisis without you, I said softly. And now I'm fixing the crisis you tried to hide inside my name. For a moment, he looked like he might cry. Then his face twisted into something colder. This is why I didn't want to help you, he snapped. You turn everything into a mess. I stared at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel gutted. I felt clear. You said life changes? I reminded him, voice calm as glass. You were right. He turned toward the door. I didn't chase him. I didn't beg him to stay. I didn't ask him to love me again. I just watched him leave like a stranger leaving a house he was never welcome in. 2 weeks later, the bank confirmed the account documents. My information had been used to secure the line of credit. My attorney filed what she needed to file. Rhodes's legal situation did exactly what it was going to do, whether I existed or not. And when my mom called crying, asking how I could do this to my brother, I didn't yell. I just told her quietly, I didn't. Then I hung up and blocked the number for the first time in my life. The final twist didn't come from Rhodes. It came from the mail. A thick envelope, official, heavy. Inside was a notice confirming the delinquent account had been flagged, frozen, and moved into investigation, along with a separate page listing every other inquiry connected to my name. There were more, not as big as the line of credit, smaller attempts, smaller risks, quiet little tests to see what he could take without me noticing. I sat at my kitchen table, the same place I'd stared at the foreclosure letter, and I realized something that made me laugh once. Sharp, breathless, almost relieved. Rhodes never stopped being protective. He just wasn't protecting me. He was protecting his empire, using my silence as the lock on the door. And that's the moment my grief finally turned into peace, because I stopped mourning the brother I had and started treating him like the man he chose to become. I stayed quiet, signed nothing, and let his own paperwork bury him because the brother who wouldn't save my home had been living inside my name the whole time.